Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and the continuation of Werewolves. So we're on the Hypertrichosis, which is actually a medical condition, as I think most of us know that. The Hypertrichosis is, it's hair, a lot of hair, sometimes a bit of hair, but it's hair. Kind of like the Wolfman from cinema, you know. It's a condition in which abnormally excessive amounts of hair grow on a person's body. It can be mild, bordering on someone just being a little hirsute, or severe, with nearly total coverage. The latter type of case can be startling to someone who's not anticipating it. But if you put yourself back in the Middle Ages, just for a moment, in England especially, Britain, and if you were to hear that wild animals, possibly a wolf, had killed someone in your village and then you encountered a stranger with hypertrichosis, who knows what conclusions he would have drawn. Let's be honest, back then, highly possible if they saw that they were a werewolf, because they just wouldn't know what else it would be. But that's pretty much where the similarity lies between someone with the condition and an actual werewolf in werewolf lore. There's no known medical correlation between hypertrichosis and murderous rampages. While it's possible that someone with the disease could have been ostracised and driven to the point of insanity, that's possible with almost anyone who's considered different. Sadly, this kind of ostracising still happens today, usually resulting in public horrendous things happening, humiliation taking place, and people sometimes lose their lives even because of this kind of bullying. And these people, driven to the brink, rarely have something as severe as hypertrichosis separating them from the in folks. I say that with little bunny slashes in the air there. In folks, what are they? Who are they? Don't know, because I don't belong there, but yeah. Still, the situation that caused the person to be treated differently or bullied is not medically linked to the person's behaviour. The bullying itself does the trick, makes them behave that way. Bullying makes a person, well, it can bring a person to just not want to be here anymore, guys. Really, it can. So, obviously, during the Middle Ages, if someone had to come across someone with hypertrichosis at exactly the wrong moment, then it could lead to them thinking that's a werewolf, but considering how rare the condition is, though, seems highly unlikely. The most likely reason hypertrichosis has been used frequently by others as an explanation is that it's a convenient-looking explanation to tag on long after lycanthropy mania died down. Consider that an entire family was documented as having this condition in 1648. Granted, it's about 50 years after people started cooling down with werewolf mania, but it's still interesting that with few medical advances in that half-century, no one thought to accuse the man and his children of being monsters. In later centuries, those with the condition ended up in sideshows. The so-called freaks of the hairy type were a staple in sideshows right until that entertainment form began to lose its appeal in the later decades of the 20th century. So the next one is Porphyria, and this is not just for vampires, okay? Porphyria. Not anymore, anyway. So could be one misguided explanation of vampirism. That's what Porphyria could be. The sufferers of this incredibly rare disease have extreme sensitivity to light, and equally notable iron deficiencies in their blood. Further, their teeth began to rot in a bizarre fashion, forming what could be mistaken for really battered brown fangs if you saw them in the darkness. Of course, porphyriacs can't drink blood to successfully make up for their deficiency, and they really don't exhibit any physical traits that will cause anyone to believe they were powerful supernatural creatures like vampires. As with hypertrichosis, porphyria, it seemed like a convenient but inadequate explanation to tag onto the legend. Or legends, obviously, more than one. Funny thing about the rare disease, and it is very, very rare, is that an alarming number of vampire fans claim to have it. I've yet to meet a porphyriac who exhibits a single symptom. But who am I to doubt someone claiming to be born with an aversion to sunlight and a need for blood? Disappointingly, true. Porphyriacs do not have lovely ivory skin. In fact, according to medical journals and associated photography, their skin is rather damaged and blotchy looking. Some serious cases lead the victim to have more of a mummified look than a vampiric one. Someone with a more moderate case of porphyria would exhibit damaged skin and sharp teeth. Do you see where I'm going with this? Depending on how hairy this individual is, he or she could be misconstrued as a wild animal-human hybrid in just the right lighting, or lack thereof. As a result, porphyria has been at times associated with werewolves in addition to vampires, making it an all-in-one condition for folklorists to mull over. Personally, I don't see how they get that, but hey-ho, who's to judge? Not to get into population breakdowns after the Black Death, but extrapolating on doing a little math, there could have been as few as 100 or so porphyriacs alive at any given time in the world, while the legends were really hopping, as it were. Add to the fact that the disease wasn't understood at all, and that many of them would have died young, without any reason, in broad daylight, and porphyria doesn't seem to be a winner as a lycanthropy explanation either. Remember, the majority of werewolves were believed to be men and women who turned into actual wolves. Someone who always looked somewhat half-bred wouldn't have fit the description. And not a single person tried, for the disease was recorded as looking anything but human in the revealing daylight courtroom sessions. Let's say goodbye to porphyria in occult books because it's not needed. Then there's the ergot craze. The ergot craze is known as ergotism. That's the last medical explanation for lycanthropy. It's sort of a combo explanation of sorts. So it covers what both people will think, what they might think they are being, what they might see. Ergotism is a unique form of poisoning, and it's caused by the claviceps Porphyria. It could be claviceps, claviceps. It depends how you pronounce your C in Latin. I know some people pronounce it as a C, some people pronounce it as a K. Me, I pronounce it as a C, so it's claviceps Porphyria. The ergot fungus. This sometimes difficult to detect fungus can grow on wheat and other crops, which can then end up tainting the majority of the village's food supply. Cooking it has no effect on its chemical nature, so all manner of raw and prepared food could be a trip waiting to happen, quite literally. You've heard about mass hysteria. Ergotism is far, far worse than that. The fungus causes two main types of problems that apply here. First, there's the physical discomfort. People suffering from ergotism end up convulsing, feeling numb throughout their bodies. This can be accompanied by intense nausea and vomiting. Overall, the sensation in a superstitious society would be one of the body changing, or a body being under supernatural attack. All this would be accompanied by an intense feeling of mania. Literally a perfect combination to make one feel that something otherworldly is suddenly happening to one's body and soul. The other main effect of ergotism is hallucinations, which can be as intense as LSD. In fact, a derivative of ergot is LSD-25, and combined with the physical discomforts just described. These hallucinations would take on forms related to what the person is feeling. For example, if a person was doubled over on all fours from spasms, the hallucination could easily fill in the blanks for why he or she is in this position. The hallucinations could be external too, making people see things moving around them that aren't really there. In addition to seeing monsters, people suffering from ergotism could see ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Ergotism has been put forth as a possible explanation for much of the witch mania in the Middle Ages, and it probably were because they drank a lot of ale back then, and a lot of the ergot ended up in the ale too. So that would make sense. Children would be put to bed by their maids. then hallucinate terrible things about these innocent women in the middle of the night, for example. The next morning often brought about horrible accusations from genuinely pained faces, and an arrest and death sentence for the maid whose only crime was being around after dinner. Animals were subject to ergot poisoning as well, and this may explain why livestock would also die as part of a family's curse from witches. Conspiracy theorists can rejoice that ergot poisoning wouldn't explain away cow mutilations, so those mysteries, well, they're still fair game. Amazingly, ergotism is not only a disease from centuries ago. Depending on a region's sophistication and quality assurance practices, local outbreaks are still possible. A Russian outbreak in 1926 affected 10,000 victims and their roundabouts. Another outbreak occurred in the French village of Pont-Saint-Esprit in 1951, with the hospital being so overwhelmed that private residences need to be converted to wards to accommodate all the ill folks. 50 years later, still may have been the most recent outbreak. It's widely believed that in 2001, ergot-infected barley wreaked havoc in Ethiopia. Hallucinations accompanied all of these more recent outbreaks, although the cool eye of medicine didn't feel the need to report what the victims were seeing as being significant. Some critics of the ergotism explanation for witchcraft and werewolf outbreaks suggest that people would have been able to recognise the signs of a so-called St. Anthony's fire over time. And certainly by the time of the Salem witch trials in 1692, St. Anthony's fire was a name given to the disease in the 12th century. However, scientific consistency was not so well consistent in the Middle Ages. It was difficult for people who had never experienced something to be able to diagnose it correctly. Also, let's be blunt, while it may be that the scoundrels of the Inquisition would have been able to spot the signs of ergotism, the common man or woman wouldn't. Witchcraft trials were great for the booming business of organised religion. Being accused of sorcery pretty much guaranteed that you and maybe your family would be wiped out of existence. Where do you think all that seized land and property of those heretics ended up? Heretics, let's say. It surely wasn't donated to the poor. So why would you bother to explain away certain supernatural attacks if the outcome was so economically rewarding? Dark times indeed. An argument against ergotism is that infected food would have affected everyone in each house. This claim may be valid, but it's hard to say. Centuries removed, how the effects would have been varied. Keep in mind that even the Black Death, which is more potent, wasn't absolute. The plague wiped out not all of Europe. People may have had resistance to ergotism, or at least just enough resistance to feel what must have been a typical occurrence. An upset stomach after dinner. Easy as that. This would be quickly forgotten, while the neighbours were claiming to see werewolves running by at night. You can see the difference in that, right? I saw a werewolf. Me, I've just got an upset tummy. Oh, big difference. Big difference. And back then in the Middle Ages, someone said they saw a werewolf running around at night. They'd blame the neighbours as well, you know. It would have been the neighbours' fault. The neighbours were doing witchcraft. They were up to something. No, you've just had some ergot, that's all. And you've had that stuff that's poisoned. But no one was going to say that. Not back then. It wouldn't have... There weren't enough known about it. And those that did know about it didn't really care, because by sentencing these people to death, they inherited their land and stuff. So, you know, it's a very good explanation of the witchcraft trials, actually, because it shows the hysteria that can be formed from the poisoning of ergot, because it is considered to be one of the most forthcoming causes of the witchcraft trials, and all the possible, there's curses here and curses there. It was the ergot poisoning that got to them. But the people of higher class who knew that it could be ergot poisoning didn't want to come forward and say that's what they thought it could be. Because, what's the point? They could wipe out a whole family and get their land and possessions. Think about that. That's why it's linked to the witchcraft trials, you see. Anyway, those are all the kinds of theories that some folklorists have put out there. Not all, you know. And me personally, my main I think my main one would be the ergot for definite, because it's well proven that ergot, when it's poisonous ergot, it's like LSD. So people would see things, the body could convulse, and that's definitely something that could be looked into more. But the others, nah, that does not make a werewolf. Definitely not. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.